Morning, everyone. Good morning. There I was, waking up this morning and thinking to myself, what shall I talk about today? And then little browse through the front pages of the newspapers, and the Times has three stories on its front page, none of which are great news for the Conservatives, but one of them in particular. Housing crisis spreads to Rwanda as homes for migrants are sold. That's interesting. Get careful, filters behind you. Yeah. Graham wouldn't like me putting a picture of Swella Braverman up, but he's not here. He doesn't get to say what I can do anymore. Right. So yes, this is the construction. Swella Braverman visited it last year as Home Secretary. She was still Home Secretary then. And she was going, oh, these are marvellous. She even went into some completed homes where it all looked very nice, all very nicely decorated, the sort of thing the people in this country would love to have. And she was saying, oh, these are marvellous. This was when the Conservatives were in that sort of double think period of, on the one hand, saying, we're going to send... because we're going to send refugees to Rwanda, that'll be a deterrent to stop them wanting to come to the UK, because Rwanda's a terrible place. Why would they want to go to Rwanda? Oh no, that'll act as a deterrent. But on the other hand, we're saying, oh, but going to live this life of luxury. Look at these marvellous homes. Oh, lovely, lovely, wonderful. Oh, Swella Braverman even said, I wish I had your interior decorator. This is marvellous. So she went around. These are the homes for asylum seekers, right? These are the homes for the refugees. We're looking after them. We're paying for these brilliant homes. Only they've been sold. Most of them have been sold to locals. And you're starting to think, hang on a minute, what's going on here? They've been sold. How much have we spent? We've spent about £500 million, or we've committed. I don't know how much money has actually gone. It's all very opaque. I mean, we don't even know that British taxpayer money was used to build these homes. We don't know that. It could be that Swella Braverman was lying. It could be that Swella Braverman has arranged with the Rwandan government to basically put these refugees in a concentration camp. But she said to them, but we need to show the people back home we're looking after them. Can you show me round a housing estate and I'll just claim these are asylum seekers? For all we know, that's the case. But our government, the Conservative government, the British government, claimed that these builds were for the refugees. So, assuming that they were telling the truth about that, we now have to ask, so why are they being sold privately to locals? Now, according to the article in the Times, the Rwandan media, which is state-controlled, the Rwandan media is saying, oh no, it was always the plan that the refugees would be integrated. In other words, there were never going to be communities of these refugees. They were going to be integrated in their own communities. So it's like, oh yeah, of course, some of these houses were going to be given to locals and then the refugees would live amongst them and be integrated and all the rest of it. You go, okay, fine. So how many of these homes are there now? Because Swella Braverman claimed that the government were going to send many thousands of refugees to Rwanda. Now, anyone who's actually read the Rwanda agreement, which is on the Home Office's website, you can read the agreement. It's all there. The money, the funding may be opaque, but the agreement isn't. That's a matter of public record. You can see, yeah, the plan was never for thousands. The agreement doesn't allow us to send thousands. That's a lie. But that's what they were claiming. And until this story, like Yvette Cooper in the House of Commons, whenever she's talked about it, which she has recently, a few weeks ago, I think, will say things like, you know, the accommodation available, there's only like 300, something like that, 300. So whatever money we're spending, which at the moment is about £500 million committed, is paying for 300 refugees because that's all there is the capacity. Well, now that's not even the case. It's a few, according to the Times, there's only a few dozen houses left. They've been sold. Mate, 70% of them have been sold. So, I mean, what's that leave? If there were 300 homes, that leaves you only 90, but I don't think there's even 90 homes left. So it's like, well, yeah. Yeah. So, we couldn't even fill up one plane with refugees, send them there, and have accommodation for them. Unless we sent whole families. But remember, the Rwanda plan isn't to send whole families. It's to, they've earmarked various people. The government would not even rule out sending unaccompanied children, children on their own. No families, orphans, whatever, children on their own, unaccompanied. They hadn't even... I mean, that should be an obvious thing to rule out, wouldn't it? Yeah, of course we're not going to send unaccompanied children. That'd be mad. They wouldn't even rule that out. And you look at a lot of things here and you just think, I mean, we know that there is no real Rwanda plan. We know it doesn't actually exist. It's existed to just move public money somewhere. We know that some of the people involved in this project are personally known to Suella Braverman. Obviously, she didn't kickstart the project. That was Priti Patel. But Suella Braverman was a cabinet colleague at the time. So Suella Braverman's doing her mate some good out of this. But it's... I mean, if you look at the reasons why we know this isn't a goer. First of all, it's a matter of record that Rishi Sunak criticised the Rwanda plan as being a waste of money. He tries now to say, oh no, I was only making sure that we were getting good value for money. It's a matter of record. As Chancellor, he criticised it for being a waste of money. James Cleverly, it's not a matter of explicit record, but he is strongly believed to have described the project as batshit, to the point where Yvette Cooper, whenever she talks about it in the House of Commons, references this fact. The fact that the Home Secretary, the person who is now in charge of the project, didn't believe it himself. And although it's not, you can't prove he said it, there's no official record that he said it, the fact that, everyone believes he did. It's like an open secret, to the point where Yvette Cooper is perfectly happy to say this at the dispatch box, and James Cleverly doesn't even complain. He doesn't, I can't remember him ever standing and saying, Madam Deputy Speaker, is outrageous. She keeps telling these lies about me. We tell you to stop, please. So there's none of that. Then there's the facts. So it's like, how do you get them there? Let's forget about the accommodation for a moment. How do we get them there? In fact, Cathal's just said there, any airlines on board yet? No, and there's not going to be. Commercial airlines have made it really, really clear they're not going to get involved in this. The government have offered what is reported to be very generous contracts. Commercial airlines have said, no, thank you. And the reason for that, the reason cited is they don't want the poor publicity. However, there's a more serious reason, and that is that it's illegal. The Supreme Court has declared... See, before the Supreme Court declared the project illegal, commercial airlines still didn't want to touch it because of the reputational damage of getting involved. But now, I haven't seen an update from commercial airlines, but now they could presumably argue that it's actually illegal because Rishi Sunak's Rwanda safety bill is designed to circumvent the courts. It's not designed to make the Rwanda plan legal. It's simply designed to stop the courts saying it's illegal. It's just a way of trying to circumvent the courts. So, but it will still be illegal because they're not changing international law. The Supreme Court made clear that it breaches domestic law, which the Conservatives could change, but they're not doing. They're not changing domestic law. But they also said it breaches international law. So even if they change that domestic law, it's still illegal. So those international airlines are not going to get involved in something that breaches international law because their companies could then be taken to court in other countries. If it breaches, for example, the European Convention on Human Rights, they could be taken to court in a country where they operate that signs up to the ECHR. If it breaks the Refugee Convention, they could be taken to court in any country that they operate that is a signatory to the Refugee Convention. So commercial airlines will not touch it. I am satisfied that there is no way in hell that they're ever going to touch it. So that means you've only got the Ministry of Defence. The government have to send them themselves with their own planes. Now, Rishi Sunak was asked about this just a couple of weeks ago in the liaison committee, and he couldn't answer them. They were asked, so are you going to use the Ministry of Defence? And he wasn't able to answer. And I'll tell you why he wasn't able to answer, because I know from a story, again in the Times actually, the Times seems to be the only one really talking about this. They, from the Ministry of Defence's point of view, it's like, okay, they have planes, right? They do have planes. But they say they do not have a secure airfield. Now, here's the situation. Imagine the scenario. This bill passes, the courts are circumvented. It doesn't mean it's legal. It just means the courts are not allowed to say it's illegal. So then you've got your Ministry of Defence plane lined up on an airfield somewhere. But then what happens when you moving the refugees to this airfield to get them on the plane? What's going to happen? Massive protest. You're going to get a load of people protesting. And now here's the thing. You will get a load of people protesting regardless. Even if the Supreme Court had said, yeah, this is totally legal, which of course they did not. But if they had, people would still have protested. So you'd still need a secure airfield. But now imagine the situation. Those protesters can now claim they are acting in defence of the law. So even if, like, the authorities arrested them, it to me seems unlikely that they could ever be convicted of any crime, as long as, you know, proportionate response, as long as they don't actually like murder someone. But, you know, even criminal damage could be potentially justified because they will be acting to prevent an illegal activity. So I would think that would embolden protesters. You'd get much stronger protests. So the Ministry of Defence is saying, we need an airfield that's secure enough to keep the protesters out. And they don't have one. And I seem to remember in the news last year, they said they needed about £20 million. And they said they're not going to find it from their tight budget. This is a Home Office project. So if the Home Office want the Ministry of Defence to help them, they can pay for it. And the Home Office have not paid for the upgrade of any airfield. So the situation is this. Rishi Sunak never agreed with the plan from the start. James cleverly described it as batshit. We can't prove that, but we know that. They can't get commercial airlines to send them. The Ministry of Defence won't send them without money to upgrade an airfield. The Ministry of Defence have not been given that money to upgrade the airfield. So, and because it will take time, even if that money were to be forthcoming, if this bill were to pass into law in, say, the next few weeks, which I don't think it's going to, but let's say it did, because I don't know what's going to happen, it doesn't have the plane to send them. And it's a mark of some of the people who believe in the Rwanda plan. They'll just say, well, if we can't send by plane, we'll send it by boat. It's landlocked. It's in the middle of Africa. How are you going to send them by boat? You had a better chance sending them by catapult. And that's not realistic either. And that's probably also illegal. So, and then you have the situation. So let's say that all of a sudden Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly now do believe in the plan. And they get a plane and they get an airfield and they get someone to fly the plane. And it's all going to work and they get them on the plane. It's like, where are they sending them to? Because the homes that our government has claimed we have paid for, most of them have been sold to local Rwandan people. We have spent, as far as I can tell, £500 million on easing a housing crisis in Rwanda, when we have a housing crisis here. Now, here's the thing. I'm all in favour of foreign aid, absolutely. I'm not sure this is the best way to spend it. But ask yourself this. If you're a Conservative voter, think about, not even the typical Conservative voter, think about the whole spread of them. How many Conservative voters, that is, voters who voted Conservative in 2019, how many of them, if you say to them, our government had £500 million burning a hole in their pockets, and they had a choice. They used the money to build new houses, and they had a choice. They could have built new houses in the UK, but they instead chose to build those houses in Rwanda. How many of those 2019 Conservative voters would you think would go, oh, that's a good move? I don't think any of them. I am going to go out on a limb here and say not just that it wouldn't even be 1% of them. I'm going to say not one single voter, Conservative voter, outside of the parliamentary party, because some of them have made a few quid out of this, but not one single ordinary Conservative voter from 2019 would say that this is a good idea. But anyway, let us catch up here. What the hell is Sunak doing for his money? Making lots of money for himself. Not out of this. The Rwanda plan is a complete dead end for him. It was there just to appease the far right. But he's made a right arse of it. Complete arse of it. So, you know, the Rwanda plan, like, I genuinely don't know what Rishi Sunak has ever thought the Rwanda plan was going to do for him. When in January 2023 he announced he was going to stop the boats, it was like, how? You know, are you going to set up safe routes so they don't need to make dangerous channel crossings? No, you're not going to do that. Well, you're not going to stop the boats then, are you? You know, the only sensible move they made last year was the returns policy with Albania. That helped. But the problem is, because it helped last year, it's actually making this year's figures look worse. I mean, they're already at record highs, so they were bad anyway. But it's making them look... They'd have been better off agreeing that returns policy this year and got a reduction. But they ended up with their reduction last year, which now makes this year's figures look worse. And he's got no follow-up. No follow-up at all. There was a fellow who completed running the length of Africa recently. The Tories will say refugees can walk there. Well, they may well do, but they're not going to. But yeah, I did see that fellow who'd run Africa. Yes. Sooner Labour wins the general election and brings in sensible grown-up policies for immigration, the better. Well, this is the thing as well. Like, so you think about this from a Conservative point of view, because it's not just like Rishi Sunak is weak. He was doing it to appease the far right. He's basically like Boris Johnson. He's just doing whatever keeps him leader at the end of the week, and he's not thinking. I thought at least Rishi Sunak might be a bit more strategic. I knew he wasn't very good at politics, but I thought he might be at least a bit more strategic. But it's like, no, I don't see any long-term plan for him. I don't see a long-term plan. How does this help him? Because where does he go from this? It's clear he doesn't actually have a Rwanda plan. It's all just performative nonsense. So where does he go from here? He can blame the House of Lords for holding up the bill. You know, he can say, I need this Rwanda safety bill, and they're blocking it. He can blame Labour peers, even though Labour have way fewer peers than the Conservatives. They're nowhere near. I mean, the Conservatives aren't a majority in the House of Lords. Labour are nowhere near. But they can claim it, because most people don't know that. They can claim this is all the fault of Labour peers. How does that help him? The Rwanda plan, like Labour, Keir Starmer last October said, as clear as you like, he said, we will scrap the Rwanda plan. And he was even asked, even if it works. Now, you would have thought that was a tricky question. You'd think, oh, hang on, a bit of caution here. Keir Starmer could have said, oh, well, it's not going to work. Well, he did say it's not going to work, but he actually said, bold as brass, yeah, even if it works, we'll still scrap it because it's a waste of money. It's the wrong way to do it, he said. So Labour is so confident. I mean, let's be clear, let's be honest here. Keir Starmer does not state any policy totally explicitly, does it? There's always like caveats and implied caveats in any policy Labour have. Whereas this one, it's totally clear. We will scrap it. Gone. Finished. There are not many policies they have that they're as explicit as that. You know, all I can think of in terms of really explicit policies are that they're not, that where there's no like sneaky little reading between the lines, is they're going to reverse the Tories' recent anti-strike moves. That's it. Those are the two things they're really explicit about. Everything else, there's little wrinkles, little subtleties to it. So you think, so Labour aren't worried about this. They don't think that this is an issue for the voters they're trying to attract at all. So it's not a wedge issue with Labour. It is a wedge issue with Reform UK. So the Rwanda plan, if it exists strategically, exists to try and win Reform UK voters back. Well, how's it going to do that? It's not working. There's no point blaming Labour. Reform UK are the ones saying, we don't think Rishi Sunak's going to stop the boats. Rishi Sunak hasn't stopped the boats. Who was right? Rishi Sunak or Richard Tice? Just saying, Rwanda's just red meat. Wave it about as he makes more cash. Doesn't matter if it costs the country money, as it's not his. Trouble with the Tories, they never run out of other people's money. Well, this is it. But at the same time, it's also causing Sunak a headache. It's causing him a massive headache. Did I see the photo MP as... Oh, the PP photo MP. So William Wragg, yes, has stood down as Vice Chair of 1922 Committee. Yes, I did. I'll tell you what else I noticed. He's stood down as Vice Chair of the 1922 Committee, which is basically like a Tory union. But he hasn't as yet stood down as Chair of the Public Affairs Committee, Select Committee. Now, you know, the BBC report did say, you know, he might do that. But what I would point out, if we're going to go into other little topics here, is William Wragg has been made to step down as Vice Chair of this 1922 Committee, which consider, to the public, who cares? The public don't care about that. You know, they do care, I care, that someone who's compromised national security remains the head of a select committee, a parliamentary select committee. That's what I care about. And what does it say that Tory MPs have forced him to step down from a position within their own club, their own private club, before he's stepped down? And for all we know, he's not going to step down from something that is of public interest. It just shows, again, it's party before country every time. Tory MPs are pissed off at him, so they've made him step down from their private club. But what about the select committee? You know, even if that happens later today, why did he step down as Vice Chair of the 1922 Committee first? Why wasn't it announced at the same time? Why didn't they do both at the same time? So, but there we go. Phil thinks through the series of events, Grindr match blackmail that's not blackmail, then MP's numbers leaked. Seems very coincidental how it all started on Grindr. Well, I mean, it'll have been done I mean, this is... William Wragg was not the first person to be targeted. They've been targeting MPs through various means. You know, they've been targeted through other means as well. It's just William Wragg happened to be caught on Grindr, that's all. And, you know, it's like... But it's utterly remarkable that MPs are not given really clear training on the fact that they cannot behave. Like, you know, as a teacher, we were given training on professional standards. You know, I've had lots of people put in the comments to videos on my own channel saying that they work in, you know, some company or that. And if they had given out personal information, because I was, as a teacher, privy to personal information, you know, other people are as well in the workplace, if you've got access to any IT system which has colleagues' personal details. And I've had lots of people say in comments, if I were to give out any of those details, as there is, you know, even if I was being blackmailed, that, you know, they'd certainly be sacked and they'd probably be facing criminal charges, but they would certainly be sacked. William Wragg, okay, you can't sack him as an MP, I get that. And in terms of, like, should they remove the whip or not? That's not sacking him. Yes, the Conservatives would probably do well to take a stand against it. But then let's be honest. If the Conservatives are going to remove the whip from William Wragg, and we won't ask where from, for compromising national security, you know, you could argue that'll just draw attention to the fact this is the same party who kept Suella Braverman on as Home Secretary after she had compromised national security, and who made Boris Johnson the Prime Minister when they already knew he was a threat to national security. So about removing the whip, I don't care about that personally. I'm not really bothered. They probably should. If it was Labour, I would expect Labour to have removed the whip if an MP did that. But he should not be chair of the select committee. He should not actually be on a select committee. But I get that Rishi Sunak can't sack him. He can pressure him to step down from the select committee. Certainly the members of the select committee, I think, could do something. But Wragg must be really gullible. Well, you say that, and maybe he is. But at the same time, the reason why these scams... I mean, if you look, I'm sure all of us, if we look in our junk folder of our email, we'll see some pretty obvious scams. And we'd think you must be gullible for falling for it. But people do fall for it because that's why the scams exist. Otherwise, our junk folder, wouldn't be full of these things. It's because people do fall for them. So maybe he was gullible, maybe he wasn't. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that MPs should get training. They should be told, you are going to be a target. Because I, as a teacher, we were sat down and we had it explained to us on my teacher training course how certain things that if you were just like a clerk somewhere, you could do. As a teacher, you have to be careful. We were told about, how... So there's certain privations in certain jobs on your private life. As an MP, not only are those things also true, but you are going to... As a teacher, I was never going to be targeted by Russian agents. What would be the point? But as an MP, you could be. As an MP, you can be targeted by people for blackmail from people from foreign states, but not always foreign states, just people who have a financial interest in having some MPs in their pocket. Could be, executives of large corporations that want easy access to government contracts. You could be a target for all sorts of nefarious people, and they should get training on that. They should be told, these sorts of people are likely to target you. They're likely to try and get information off you, compromising information and images and videos in order to blackmail you to get what they want. And you need to be mindful of this. And to go alongside that training, there should be harsh consequences for ignoring that training. The training needs to take the form of, these are the standards of behaviour, and there needs to be consequences if you fail them. Because I find it incredible that Wragg wouldn't... I mean, he may be investigated by the Standards Committee, but if he isn't, or if they conclude that ultimately there's nothing they can do, again, the standards for MPs need tightening up, don't they? Because compromising security of MPs, you can have some sympathy for the fact that he panicked in this situation, but in any other job you wouldn't have any sympathy shown to you. You'd have no sympathy at all. But there we go. I think as an MP you should expect to be held to a higher standard. It's pathetic the excuses they come out with. MPs need to face real consequences, otherwise the shit will never end. Well, do you know what? It comes down to this, doesn't it? And I will gripe at Labour over this. I've heard Keir Starmer say things like this. I've heard various Labour MPs say things like this. When they talk about, right, here's the thing. I'm going to give you a prediction now, because he said the same thing as well. When Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister, he'll obviously give a speech at Downing Street, right? I bet you he references the fact that being Prime Minister is an honour or a privilege, because he keeps using those words about various positions. And it's not, and I take real exception to it. And that's where I think there's a fundamental problem. MPs should not, when they win their seat or form any sort of position, they should not describe it as an honour or a privilege. And yet they always do. My local candidate is not an MP yet, but my local candidate has said that it would be the honour of his life to serve as our MP. I was like, don't say that. That's not true. Because an honour or a privilege is for you. It should be, and I keep saying this, it should be a duty and a responsibility. I want all MPs, when they win their seats or when they, become Prime Minister, say, I want them to refer it as a duty or a responsibility, or preferably both. Because honours and privileges are rewards. They're things for you to enjoy. And that is the problem. When MPs get this into their heads, that it's an honour or a privilege, it makes it about them. And it shouldn't be. So there's something fundamentally wrong with the attitudes of MPs and parliamentary candidates towards being MPs. Steve saying, I'm a parish council and we've had training on this, most of which is common sense. Well, it's absolutely remarkable then that MPs don't. And how do I know they don't? How do I know they didn't have this training? William Wragg just ignored it. Because the news articles that were reporting on this at the time, at the end of last week, were saying that there should probably be training for MPs on this. So that means it doesn't exist. It says if it's only been reported recently, it may have been a while ago, they seem to have forgiven him. It certainly was a while ago, but I don't think they've forgiven him because they've made him stand down as vice chair of the 1922 committee. So that shows that Tory MPs are absolutely livid about it. Not livid enough to force him to step down from the select committee as well. They may do that, but their first priority was obviously their own little club. You may ask yourself why the leadership is sticking by him. Why is Rishi Sunak and the whip sticking by him? Is it because they need every person they can get? Is it because withdrawing the whip from, like, at the moment, I have done the maths. I saw some news reports suggesting it was 52 letters that needed to go in to trigger a leadership contest with Sunak. I thought, has it changed then? Because it was 53. Because in theory, the more whips you remove from Tory MPs, the smaller that number is. Because what you actually need is 15%. No, it's still 53. But I haven't worked how many more Tory MPs would have to lose the whip before it suddenly becomes 52. So maybe Sunak just doesn't want to punish anyone who's basically an ally of his. And William Wragg, I think, is a bit of an ally. But there we go. Stan won't ever get caught in a sex sting. Is like a doll downstairs, nothing there, smooth as Wedge Street in his face. I suspect that is true, but nonetheless, I don't like the words that are used because he is also leading his party, and it's encouraging. It's because words do matter. They especially matter in politics, and I do think that they should take greater care of them. I don't like any politician referring to, or anyone referring to, public office as either an honour or a privilege, because it should be seen as neither. It should be, and Starmer's a lawyer, so he'll use language quite carefully. I mean, actually, he clearly doesn't use language very carefully. He keeps cocking things up in interviews, but still, he should, and I think there should be an emphasis on duty and responsibility. Can we fire Esther McVeigh now for obviously failing to do a job as a minister? Unfortunately, no. Only the Prime Minister can sack ministers. Cathal OG, €3 super chat. Thank you very much. New Taoiseach Day in Ireland, much as it matters. Well, it may do. It may do. We will have to see. Obviously, it always matters when a neighbour has a new head of government. But yeah, we have our own skip fire going on here. So it's a bit like the reverse thing of Brexit, isn't it? There's like people in the EU going, look, yes, the UK is important, but actually it's dropped down the level of importance because Russia's trying to invade us. So we've got other things to deal with. We sort of have the same thing here. It's like, it should be important. We should be seeing news about what does the new Prime Minister of Ireland stand for. One of our closest neighbours, well, literally our closest neighbour, but one of our closest allies of our neighbours. And then it's Taoiseach, if you don't mind. Dear. But then it's also, we've got so much going on here. It's like most people won't even be aware, won't even know, no idea. But anyway, there we go. It said telling stammer off for certain words is the least of our worries, while willies have been waved about left, right, and centre. Well, that is possibly true, but nonetheless, I think it is possible to focus on more than one thing at a time. But I'm going to leave it there. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. I'll be back on again tomorrow. I'm doing like a hat trick this week because Graham's gallivanting again. So we'll see what we've got tomorrow. But thanks for coming on. Have a great day. And until next time, I will see you later.